Welcome to MOBE Mondays.
Welcome. My name is Yvette Moyo. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. This is a very important evening for us for MOBE Mondays. And for those of you who have joined us for the first time, I'd like to give you a bit of background. I'm the founder of MOBE, Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment. And the whole premise of our twice a year MOBE Symposium series was to accelerate the success and the opportunities and enhance the opportunities for African American owned businesses as well as corporate executives to succeed in their jobs and positions, understanding that we had been sort of locked out of some of the industries and the earning potential from the both marketing and advertising industry, and that'll at marketing and entertainment industry, and that's kind of obvious. And even today, that was almost 30 years ago, and even today, there's still a need for MOBE. What we had done in the first 12 years of our conference series is twice a year we met to ask people to look at the fellow attendees and come up with opportunities for them to cross-pollinate, to build each other, to grow each other. And luckily, we could count at $200 million, over $200 million in business that had been exchanged and reported to us as a result of people meeting each other at MOBE and doing deals. And so that became our claim to fame. And sometime in social media, you'll see hashtag MOBE deals, hashtag MOBE fam, because we became MOBE family. It was a family, and we were competing and we were succeeding at showing what we could do together, and that collaboration works. Today, some of those people that joined us for the first time at our MOBE conference are Reggie Hudlin, Sinbad, Monty Ross, who was the leading person at 40 Acres and a Mule with Spike Lee. That is our foundation. And so tonight we continue with some equally amazing players in the industry, players for equity, players for that, to see that the game be played on an even and level playing field with referees and measurements so that we could have a chance to win the game, just like we do on the baseball teams and on the basketball teams and any other sport where the rules are clear and the playing field is even. So tonight, I'm so pleased to introduce this panel to you, and to also introduce to you the person that is leading the panel, who has come back to MOBE and helped relaunch the brand after being dormant for 12 years in terms of symposiums. We didn't do symposiums for 12 years, but we did continue to do those MOBE deals. And it was Curtis Symonds who came to me, and he and my son, and emphasized that it was time, that nothing else existed in industry with heart and a passion for other people making it in these industries, and for opening the doors of corporations to have us be more than just dancers and singers and artists, but to really participate in these businesses. And so tonight we have a Mr. Curtis Symonds, an amazing, wonderful human being that is probably counts himself as a father and grandfather first. He's a dear friend of mine. He's a friend of the industry. In fact, recently it was announced that he would be one of this year's cable and broadcast industry. He would be entering into the Hall of Fame of the cable and broadcast industry. Round of applause for Mr. Curtis Symonds. And it is not just for his achievements and the ability to close deals and to serve others, a universe of others that I could just go on and mention, but his ability to be a human being, to have people, to translate and communicate to people that fairness matters. And the fairness would not only matter, but grow their business more than it would grow our business. The residual effects would be much greater, thanks to Curtis Symonds being able to communicate that with major brands as a leader at major cable and broadcast companies. I'm just going to name a few: ESPN, superstars, absolute superstars. So when BET started, they grabbed Curtis Symonds to lead their companies onto profitability and success. And it is Curtis Symonds that made that happen. I could say so much more, but he's got more to say today because he's moderating and leading this discussion. And it is a wonderful discussion. It is the case for education and diversity as tools for business growth. I'm going to turn it over to Curtis. And again, I'm Yvette Mohill, the founder of MOBE, but Curtis is the chairman of MOBE, and particularly these MOBE Mondays series. I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to remove myself from the screen, sit back and learn something, because that's what MOBE is about, the best free education in advanced marketing that you could ever get. And I'm going to be a student tonight. Mr. Curtis Symonds.
Yvette, thank you very much. It's a pleasure, and it's always interesting when people try to give you the accolades. You know, it's really coming from the heart that all these folks have really been supportive of all the things I've done. Very excited tonight. I am the CEO and president of HBCU Go TV, a network designed around trying to educate more people on the real leadership, the value, the history, the legacy of HBCU schools. And I am really, really happy about the panel I have tonight, because I have two good friends of mine. One I've known for a long time. One I'm getting ready to know much better through the night. But we talk about something that is very meaningful to all three of us, that I think I'm hoping that you are the listening audience tonight, really coming up with some real questions, some meat and potatoes, because we got a good panel here that's going to talk about diversity, education, you know, being inclusive, equity, and talk about some of the real meanings and the roles that these areas should be taking. So I first want to introduce one of my long friends, who I've known for years, I've been in the cable industry for a long time, by the name of Jack Myers. He is the founder of MediaVillage. I've known Jack from his days of the Jack Myers Report. He has blown that into a village. As you hear the word out there in days, it takes a village to grow the community. Well, Jack has done that over the years, and he's done an astounding job in what he's done. And I want to turn over to Jack and let him take a few minutes to talk about himself. And then I'm going to talk to another friend of mine by the name of Phil McKenzie, and I'm going to let Phil tell you a little bit about himself. So Jack, get us rolling tonight.
Well, you know, thank you, Curtis. We do go back a long way, and we've shared a lot of realities in the marketplace. You from your perspectives, me from mine, very different perspectives, but we always seem to come together on the same page. So I appreciate your inviting Phil and me here today. AdvancingDiversity.org evolved out of several years of work in that I did. Really as an extension of MediaVillage, which is a brand that we founded in the early 1990s with a clear vision coming out of my own education in something called media ecology. Media ecology, medium is the message, fundamentally. Right. And it really focused on understanding the culture, the impact of technology on the culture, and the obvious and apparent reality that we were not only moving toward a more female-centric world in business as well as society and culture, but also a much more diverse world across the board, across the spectrum of diversity. And that led in 2017 to founding the Advancing Diversity Hall of Fame and AdvancingDiversity.org under the MediaVillage umbrella. And I'm really proud that Phil McKenzie has recently agreed to join with an extraordinary background himself. Phil has been one of our regular columnists, writing on influence and influencers on a weekly basis for us for, I guess, about 3 years now, Phil, right?
Absolutely. 3 years and counting.
And so in that context, Phil has joined as executive director of the diversity initiatives and AdvancingDiversity.org. So I'll let Phil take it from there.
Phil, give us a quick background on, one of the things that, like I said, I have a new friend. I'm an HBCU graduate of Tufts State University at Ohio. Phil is an HBCU graduate out of Howard University and has his MBA out of Duke. So Phil, talk to us a little bit of how you got with Jack, with Advancing Diversity, and give us a little bit on your background there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, first I'll start off with the same thank yous. You know, I always believe in anytime you're meeting with people and talking to folks, you start with a little bit of gratitude. So it's a honor to be able to join you guys tonight on this program. It's one that's been an important voice in our community, advancing incredible issues that need to be challenged and aren't always challenged in a lot of what you can call quote unquote mainstream media. So to be a part of these conversations tonight, I really appreciate the entire MOBE team, not just, the ones that are on camera and the ones who are talking, but there's a whole host of people behind the scenes making all of this happen. So gratitude goes out to all of them. As it pertains to myself, my background, as you remarked, I graduated from the Mecca, the one and only Howard University, the only HU, the only HU. And, Howard gave me my foundation. It made me the person that I am today. It gave me long-lasting relationships that they're immeasurable. The impact of going to school, of the caliber of Howard at the time that I did, really created a roadmap for what became the rest of my career. I went to Duke for my MBA. I worked for many years at Goldman Sachs. I ran my own marketing agency. I'm a content producer. I have a podcast. I work with MediaVillage. Advancing diversity is my focus. And, that all of that road started at Howard University. But why that's important is that it gave me a foundation that allows me to do the work that I do today. And, as Jack mentioned, I was a columnist, a longtime columnist with MediaVillage over 3 years, writing my own opinion pieces. I had my own column, writing client pieces as well. And really when the opportunity came to work with Jack and to, really dig into the foundation that he's built with advancing diversity, it was something that I couldn't say no to, because Jack made a very important transition very early on, that it was important to move beyond advocacy to activism. It's something that you'll undoubtedly hear many times over the course of this conversation, because we're going to beat this like a drum, because we're in a moment, in a very important crossroads where, it's time really for the statements to end. We've seen enough of the, sans serif font on Black writing, saying that these things, meaning diversity, Black lives, truly matter. It's time for the marketing industry, it's time for the advertising industry and all adjacent industries to really step up to the plate. And the work that Jack has done prior to this moment is set in a crucible that is poised to meet the moment, and that was really all the calculus I needed to come on board as executive director. I'm new in the seat, but I'm years in the lived experience of why these things matter. And, I'm ready to have this conversation. So, let's go.
So let's jump into that. That's a good lead into what I want to ask you and Jack to both give your answers on. But my first question is, the advertising industry as a whole has been immune from questions arising around to own equity, diversity, and inclusion in the time of this reckoning situation right now going on with the country. What issues are most critical that need to be addressed in both you guys' mind right now? I'll start with you, Phil, and then I'll go to Jack.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the advertising industry has been immune. I think they've been resistant, but people like Jack have been in this fight. People like Derek Walker have been in this fight. People like Heidi Gardner have been in this fight. I'm naming some luminaries that I know, that I've worked with, that I respect, that have been, advancing an agenda to confront the issues around diversity and inclusion, or rather, I should say, the lack of diversity and inclusion in advertising. So what I would offer is that rather than them being immune, like I said, they've been resistant. And I think the time for that resistance is over. There's more of us than ever that are aligned, that are focused, and the need is more than it's ever been. If the industry is truly to survive, it can no longer view talent through a narrow prism. It's got to bring more inclusive voices to the table, and more people are demanding it. Customers are demanding it. That's another large monolithic voice out there. People want to see themselves represented. They're savvier than ever. They know when they're being pandered to. And if you don't have voices in the room creating the work, writing the work, shooting the work in front of the camera, responsible for the budgets, it all comes through, So I think this is a moment, a critical moment that we're faced with to kind of bring power to bear here.
I agree on that. Jack, what's your feel on that?
Well, Phil, first of all, said it perfectly. I'll double down on a couple of the comments that he made, and I'll also react to the use of the word immune, because I feel that it's, immunity suggests that you have built up, as Phil points out, a resistance to something, but it also suggests that resistance is is static. There's an inertia. I think we have what's much worse than inertia in our business. There's economic and there's cultural reality. So on the cultural side, we not only have we have a cancer in our business, and that cancer is an active and progressive movement that uses Phil words again, resistance to any kind of change that disrupts the status quo. We have an industry that's been built up culturally over 100 years and 50 years, if you want to take a more modern perspective to it, but that follows certain patterns of how people are brought into this community, how they're developed within the community. But when the industry standards around business are that retention of young people who join an industry is typically after 5 years, 60%, and diverse young people, 30 to 40%. In the media industry, our retention after 5 years is hovering around 50% and declining. And the diverse retention after 5 years is under 20%. So even if there's a pipeline, even if we're bringing them in, there has been little proactive effort. Yet, as Phil points out, we've had all this wonderful advocacy that's from this organization, that are millions and millions of dollars being raised, most of which has gone to the hospitality communities in Las Vegas or in Cannes and other places where these events are hosted,
right,
or New York. Enough with the events, and we decided against that before COVID-19, but obviously it's working for us now. Let's put that same money toward actual solutions, and that's what Advancing Diversity is focused on, is identifying not necessarily us having the solutions, although Phil is leading several, but recognizing those organizations like MOBE that are moving forward, that are activists, that are showing positive business results as well as strong, diverse, positive results, and helping to fund those through the funding raised. Now, the question is whether, when you're not going to a nice event with, fine alcohol and wines and food to celebrate with your colleagues, maybe 10, at best case 20% of whom might actually be diverse at diversity events. Let's see if that same money is put into activism, and that's what we're challenging the industry to do.
Well, I think you both are right on point, and I wanted to hear your opinions about it, because I'm gonna dig a little deeper, because I want to get your feedback from what Byron Allen has been on a rep lately regarding this particular topic. But before I get to that, I want to touch on something that you both have been involved in. I mean, this whole purpose of this panel tonight is about educating and diversity tools for business growth. The big problem that has been in our business over the years is the education side. So, Jack, you've written a white paper on this, and you and Phil worked on. Give us some feedback on how you got there with that thinking.
Well, I think Phil is actually in many ways better suited. So if you don't mind, I'll turn it back over to Phil. All right, I'll take it. The case. Well, we've identified. We've developed our own white paper, the case for education and diversity as tools for business growth, which focuses in on the economics, and the economics are clear. you're more than 30% more likely to have better profits, better revenues, and you're more than 25% more likely as an organization to have better EBITDA profitability if you not only work to and successfully develop a diverse workforce, but educate that workforce. And the educational tools are very hard to come by. It's not the 3-hour coursework, but it's access to short-term thinking, meeting preparation, an understanding of the dynamics to reward people for the self-learning they do, the podcasts they listen to. It's really measuring and evaluating an organization's ability to learn within its workforce. Are they encouraging learning? Does the workforce feel that they're gaining the tools, resources, and access to guides and support to grow in their own careers? Are they focused? Are they able to focus not just on gaining experience, but experiences? Because today's young generation don't just want a narrow vertical lane to go in. They want to try many things. They want to learn. They want to have a vision of what it looks like to move up, and they want to be able to see that actively through others who are achieving and in those roles. Those are all the tools, just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg that needs to be developed and built in the media industry. It exists in other industries.
Well, I agree with you. I think that's one of the things that Phil and I have a common barrier with that coming from an HBCU, because that education and understanding that point that you're talking about is something that we pride ourselves on coming through that. So Phil, touch on that a little bit.
I think, in addition to the points that Jack made, we're also faced with the way in which we tell ourselves stories, right? Like, we're talking about marketing, we're talking about advertising. At the core of this is a storytelling business. And there's certain stories that emphasize the status quo that Jack talked about. And part of that is education. We have, candidates that are more qualified, more prepared, more academically, more formally suited to do this work than ever before. But yet the numbers aren't matching the available talent pool. Once people are in organizations, as Jack pointed out, there is very little way to, measure, ascertain, and then reward them for the learning that they're doing that is not formalized as part of the company-wide place in which they work. So we have a challenge with both formal, not being the formal education, not really being appreciated as an untapped pool. And then once people kind of come through these very narrow ways in which they are recruited, they're informal ways in which culture moves. They learn their jobs, they get opportunities to actually upskill themselves as a natural part of doing their job. That doesn't happen as well, right? Or if it does, people aren't fast-tracked. There's so many things going on in the way in which we tell and emphasize certain stories that support the way in which we do business as compared to supporting another newer, more effective way of doing business. And I think that's where the education piece really needs to be pulled apart. And there's tools in which you can do that, but you have to start to rethink how you're even classifying education in the first place.
So let me take you back in time. Let me take both of you back in the time warp here. And I want to throw this out at both of you and see what your thoughts are. Back in 1967, Dr. King did a speech to some Stanford students that talked about two different Americans. He talked about the American who could get good loans, jobs, opportunities, civic and good opportunities, good living, blah, blah, blah. And then the other gets not. What's the difference today, in your opinions?
There is no difference today.
Here we go.
Outside of, time has passed, but, me speaking for myself, and editorializing.
Yeah, no, speak from the heart.
Yeah, there is no difference. I think if anything, the chasms that we see have only gotten wider. We're seeing the effects of that depending on where some people are listening and tuning in. You know, COVID is either something very real or something not real at all. And what I mean by that is that the effects of it are clearly real, but who it's hitting is disproportionately affecting people of color, is affecting those with lesser means. And these are examples of that two Americas, you know, beyond the conversation we're having here about this industry, which obviously can be used as a metaphor, to a prism to which we can examine that ideology. But I think clearly, you know, they are two different Americas. And even what makes it more frustrating is that talent pool conversation, those of us who have bought into the story of success, of achievement, are still frustrated. You know, when I talk to friends who are creative directors, they're copy editors, they're filmmakers, you know, they're planners, they're frustrated, you know, and they have the pedigrees, they have all the things that if you looked at on paper, they should be running these agencies. You know, they should be in charge of these budgets, and they're still feeling as if there's not a place for them. That's an example of a to America that transcends the economic examples that even Dr. King was giving us at that time. You know, so that's, you know, I'll leave it there and let Jack jump in, and we can just kind of keep it rolling.
Well,
Got it.
Dr. King could not be more appropriate to bring up in the context that his words are not resonating with a whole sector of America and increasingly the world. His words don't only apply to the Black experience in America, they apply to the progressive spirit of human rights at its foundation. The education that we talk about, we need to start not just at the college level, the high school level, the grade school levels, but from birth.
Yes.
And instead of what young people are hearing and growing up with is not only two Americas, but two diametrically opposed Americas. One that feeds off of non-intellectualized belief in a single human being who personifies what they see as being a vision for a future in which they belong. And another seeing in that same human being and the spirit that he embodies and the message that he communicates being the antithesis of what we believe we represent or can live with.
Right.
And we have an election here where one side is passion, appealing to the culture. You know, I watched Jojo Rabbit, a movie that, you know, about a young Hitler youth during the final days of World War II. And the opening scenes of Jojo Rabbit are from Leni Riefenstahl's Hitler propaganda movies. And they're cheering. It's like they're cheering for the Beatles. It's like they're cheering in the 40s for Frank Sinatra. And you see that same, and they're cheering, of course, for Hitler. These are real scenes, real people. And we see that personified in the way that Trump is able to communicate not just positively for his own brand and position and personal wealth, and God knows what country he's representing. Well, we know what country he's really representing, but also we're seeing an antagonism and a cutting down of the spirit of Dr. King. And with him, being a 60s generation who grew up with the civil rights the protests, who was on a campus with heavy at Syracuse that was highlighted in films, and moving through the anti-war era, my generation fucked it up. We fucked it up Curtis. I'm not sure your age, whether you're a part of that generation. But I can take credit for it.
Right, yeah.
And we did, but we believed in these things, and we allowed them to collapse around us, leading us to where we are today.
Right.
And it's the younger generation, and only the younger generation, that's going to pull us out of it. And if they don't get out and vote, if they don't turn it around, and if all of us don't do everything we can to be as vocal and positive we can, we're going to have one America. And it's not going to be the America that we're comfortable living in, unfortunately.
I agree with that. Which moves me to another point that I wanted to make for both you and Phil. Byron Allen, who runs Independent Studios, made a very strong point the other day, and I'd like to hear you guys' feedback about this systematic racism on Madison Avenue that has been existing and still exists. Phil, what's your feelings on this? You're in the diversity field. You're looking at advancement. This is a major area now in regards to getting money, because what Byron's point is, and he makes a good point. For example, he says, I own the Weather Channel, and I can't get Coca-Cola to buy time with me. I don't get that. How does one of the biggest channels of all, where you got to get weather, can't get a sponsor like Coca-Cola? Won't even talk to it. How does that happen, Phil? And now with your new role in advancing diversity, what are you going to do to assist a guy like Byron Allen and his group to help them funnel through some of this?
Yeah, Byron is outspoken as well he should be, right? Because he is someone who, has built this media conglomerate. As he said, I've heard him talk many times, house in foreclosure, this is scrapping with everything you have in order to maintain and grow a business.
Right.
And now it's gotten to the point where the advertisers should be coming to him.
Right.
They should be beating down the door to be a part of these conversations, not just because it's right, but it is right. I don't think we should lose track of a human case for these things, but there's also a pure business case for it. We know that when you invest in, however you want to call it, whether it's multicultural marketing, AFM markets, Latino markets, Asian American markets, you see returns that outstrip just regular general market advertising.
Right.
That case has been made, by hundreds of people, so we don't need to belabor ourselves with that type of conversation. I think what we're seeing there is, I can only speak from my personal experiences, is just a sense of cronyism. People do business with the people that they know.
Right.
They do business with the people that look like them. And if you're not in rooms with these folks from the very beginning, it makes it very difficult to crack into a real substantive financial relationship.
So
outside of what Byron does a lot, which is litigate.
Let me ask you something on that point you just made there.
Yeah.
So will advanced diversity look at creating some efforts to try to help people move through this? Because MediaVillage has a big stamp out there. So your brand goes out there underneath MediaVillage, and with Jackson many years, you have a voice out there. So as head of diversity, head of executive director of advancement diversity, are you now going to be out there more as, waving the baton saying, hey, Mr. Coco, this isn't right. You need to be doing this. This isn't right. What are you going to do to help him out on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Our job my job specifically, is to tell hard truths. I've always done that in my work. And this is why I took the role. I think Jack, to his credit, I think he recognized that I am not a traditional marketing person. I've worked in marketing, but I've never been inside of a big agency. I come from Wall Street, and I've not done finance in a long time, but I am not beholden to any of these people in terms of relying on them to feed me what needs to be done. And me and Jack sat down and he was going harder than me. And I'm one that's, pretty comfortable with using a lot of wild language. And I was like, okay, we're ready to rock. Because
Jack got history now. Don't think Jack's a quiet mind. He's got history.
This dude is serious, right?
That's right. I told him, don't hold back. There is no holding back on this. That this is the moment. We don't have the luxury of time. This is it. I'm glad you mentioned Byron Allen. I'm very proud at MediaVillage. We published the article, the message that you're talking about. If you go to MediaVillage or meetingprep.com, you'll see Black America Speaks, America Should Listen by Byron Allen. So his byline piece is there. And we also are one of our members at both advancingdiversity.org and MediaVillage is the Weather Channel. And we've been publishing several commentaries about entertainment studios. We've also published a 4 solutions to Black leadership.
Talk about that.
Umbrella Black Leaders Matter. And we said clearly that the industry, companies like Coca-Cola and others, need to disproportionately invest in Black-owned, Hispanic, as well as Hispanic media. And I think there's a key point to be made between Black-owned media and Black media, Hispanic media, other media that's not Black-owned. That doesn't mean you don't want to, that there shouldn't be disproportionate reparations made to all of them. But I think we do need disproportionate spending and support for Black media. And that message is so, it's the anathema of media buying, better than anyone, Curtis.
I was going to say, when I was at BT, one of the things that really amazed me more than anything was how openly people would say is, I'm only going to spend money with BT. I'm not going to spend with any other. And I say, wait a minute, there's 20 Hispanic channels. All you guys spending money with other Hispanic. Why is it only one? Why is the African American community only put in like one? I mean, there's different voices out here, and you just highlighted, Jack. But that's been the education that we need to spill over because that's been the thinking.
Well,
at the end of the day,
Lewis Carr have been hearing for years. We reach the Black audience through Anglo media.
Right.
And, so if we buy you, you're going to be a lower CPM, a lower cost per thousand. I believe that's not only immoral and unethical, it's really and non-transparent. It's borderline illegal. It bothers me.
You're right there. You're in it right there, Jack. It's borderline illegal. When we were coming up the ladder, I'll never forget this scenario. And I came into BT, we were 18 million homes. In a year, I got to 30. In 2 years, I got to 50. And, we're still getting $500 a spot at 50 million homes. And I'm saying, well, how is that? But that was to your point. Jack, to your point, what you and Phil making the point of. And that racism, which is a big R out there, stands out. It stands out. Now, people are afraid to talk about it because everybody thinks they're going to get blackballed if you go too deep. You
want to prove the value of to Coca-Cola and other companies of the Black media, Black-owned media. Make it economic. Make them feel it.
Exactly.
Let them see what happens.
We should all grasp that.
I remember growing up when I was a kid. I started drinking Coke because I heard that Pepsi wouldn't sell to Israel. Now, I didn't know why I was doing that, other than my father said you shouldn't drink Pepsi because they don't get to Israel. So I didn't drink Pepsi. I'm still a Coke fan. I'm still a Coke. Well, I don't drink any soft drinks now, but.
No, I think you're right. Let me ask another question that I think is big out there for our listening audience, and both of you guys have been through it, but I think they would love to hear from you on some advice on it. Mentoring is a big thing in this whole diversity community. And one of the things that I can relate to, me and Phil can relate to, is that in an HBCU circle, you don't get a lot of that in how to really grow up in growing into a business, a media business. What are some of the words and wisdom and tools that you guys could give back about your feelings on mentoring and how important and what you would be doing to help others out to get there. Phil, I'll start with you and then I'll come to Jack.
Yeah, I think mentoring, whenever I talk to people, and it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be younger people. Like, I think we think of mentoring as this thing that happens when you're young, but I think mentoring, the need for mentoring and for positive relationships that are going to advance your career never goes away. Your personal and professional development, that's consistent.
That's
you
right.
know. But what I do tell people is no one is going to care as much about your career or your personal development, because this doesn't need to be just a career conversation, than you do. You have to take active ownership in your career, in your personal development, and you have to be aggressive. It doesn't mean you're annoying. There's a fine line there. You got to find that line, but you have to be very aggressive in terms of engaging people and asking for help. I think one of the things that I suffered from was believing in, again, these mythologies, these stories. I can only speak as a Black person coming up in the 90s that, if whatever happened to you in a corporate environment, you were supposed to suck it up. It was important for you to be a good team player, to not complain, to not be angry, to never raise your hand and say something's not working out for you, because if you did that, you would be labeled as a troublemaker. You weren't a good team player, all of these different things that you were told. And I think a lot of folks condition themselves into that thinking. So they suffer in silence, and they also don't raise their hand and ask for things. And what I found is that my majority peers, whether on Wall Street or in other environments, they got no problem asking. Even when they ain't ready, they would raise their hand in a meeting and be like, yo, I could do that, or I should be doing this, or yo, look at me. And I think we assume, because we've been told and believe these myths of meritocracy, oh, if you just do the work, they'll recognize you. Oh, if you just show up every day and work extra hard and put in the time, oh, they'll give you your due. And it's it don't work that way.
Right.
You always gotta be competent. Competency is not the issue, but we have to stand up and demand that our careers are important. Our personal development is important. So you gotta find mentors. You have to make it a relationship that's not transactional, but one that's based on reciprocity. Right. There are all these little things that people can do, but I think those are some critical ones, that don't assume that if you just do the work, that all of a sudden someone's just going to, give you the rose at the end of the day, like a reality show, and pluck you out of the crowd and say, okay, now you're going to be the one that we give accolades to. The squeakiest wheel gets the grease, and you got to make yourself the squeakiest wheel.
No, I think you're right on point on that. I think you make a good analogy on that for me, on Phil. And the one thing that I always kidded about when in corporate America, it was always funny when you had two of us going for the same job, two of us going for a VP job, and how that got positioned. Because it was always, at the end of the day, you're going against each other. Now, you could be two good friends, but the corporate will force you to go against each other before it's all over, and then you end up not even being friends at the end of the day, because that's just how the buy-in was to get where you had to be. And that was just the mentality there. Jack, what's your feelings on the mentoring side? What do you feel about that, Jack?
Well, first of all, on that last point, you just described the whole media industry, where it's all about taking share from the other guy in order to grow. It's an industry that hasn't grown in 10 years and won't grow in the next 10 years unless it really does invest in education and diversity. And if it doesn't, it's going to be static and stagnant. And it's going to continue to be a share game that Facebook, Google, Amazon, and a few other players are going to win, and everyone else is going to lose. So we really have to start paying attention. Mentoring, I've always had an attitude that I've always felt that before I was called a mentor, I always felt that I was also well served by being a mentee. So I always tried, if I was quote, mentoring someone or guiding them, that I always felt I learned as much, if not more, than I shared. I may have been able to share relationships, knowledge, but they were of of a time in a period that I always thought was outdated and didn't have much of a future. The legacy and traditions of our medium that, you know, of industry and business in general that Phil had described so well. So I've always believed in dual mentoring. I've always believed that organizations that are mentoring organizations are doing a disservice to the knowledge that's being brought in and not properly respecting it or honoring it, that it's all about sharing the rules and the type of misguided advice that all too many mentors have shared that have held down progress and growth. I think we have to revisit the whole concept of mentoring and guides and support and fundamentally reverse it in many ways so that we're looking at what we can do to better support and grow and enhance and bring up a generation. And it's not through the principles and guidelines of the past. It's by understanding where we need to head and helping a generation that really understands that and cultures that understand how to force their way through the pain, the challenges, the discomfort, the anger that's generated by those who want to foster change. The Black generation and others other underserved communities that are doing that every day of their lives. This is what we need to learn from, and we need to empower. So a platform that I've lived on at MediaVillage for the last decade or more has been empowering the new majority to take the reins. And we've done that. I think, Phil, you've seen in the team that you come into at MediaVillage, really empowering the new majority. And that's young and diverse.
So, Phil, let me ask you a question. Let me
go back. I just said something that bothered me, so I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead, push up.
I said young and diverse because we also focus on ageism. We focus on veterans, so I want to broaden the spectrum. And
I like that.
Okay.
I like that, Jack. No, that's a good point, Jack. But I like what Phil was saying because, my career, I've been blessed in what I call, building relationships. And as Phil's talked about earlier, I always thought some of my biggest relationship with always with the older gentlemen in the house. I always feel every day I'm trying to learn. In any business, I'm a big basketball nut now. I'm a basketball coach. I do my stuff in cable, in the business, in the broadcast business. But I learn every day. I'm trying to educate myself, meeting and greeting different people so that, I can learn to grow and be more flexible in different areas. But Phil, let me ask you a question that's been burning in me for days. I want to hear your opinion of this because Byron brought it out very strongly again in his piece. Being the executive director of diversity for Advancing Diversity, do we need a diversity role or should you be an investment guy? Byron's point is, what do the diversity guys do anymore? And his label was, it's just a label. I haven't seen the guy swing a bat at diversity in any company, So how do Jack is going to give you the tools now. Are you going to hold folks accountable that made, for example, the conversation said, I'm going to spend more dollars in these communities now? Is Advancing Diversity with your leadership going to start pinpointing these guys and calling them out and saying, you haven't spent enough over here, you haven't spent enough over there? What's going to be your directive by handling that diversity?
Yeah, I agree with what Byron said. I think the diversity doesn't exist through a function. AdvancingDiversity.org, Advancing Diversity, as built and conceived within MediaVillage, is a series of programs designed to have actionable results. And right. I'm the person in charge of that umbrella, as part of a team. So I'm not a diversity officer. I'm not a HR person. I come from strategy. I come from this from a place of culture, and I come from this as being commercial. It doesn't mean that our conversation in terms of equity and justice in this society is merely an economic one, but it does mean that in a corporate environment, it is an economic conversation. It is a conversation of having opportunity, being paid fairly, having the exact access to business and all of the opportunities as everyone else. So my job is to hold any organization accountable as it pertains to that. I am not there to fix and solve their diversity issues per se, because I don't do unconscious bias training. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to move the dial as it pertains to economics. So that comes with a certain level of responsibility. So I will talk and work with diversity and inclusion officers, because I believe the vast majority of them are doing work that they truly believe in, that they care about, that they're passionate about. They're hamstrung by organizations that do not properly empower them and give them the tools and resources they need to do the job. So that's the resistance piece that we talked about before. Right. They're diversity and inclusion people on advertising agencies and beyond that care deeply about these struggles, but they're not always in C-suites. They don't have the ear of the CFO. They don't have the ear of the CEO. We're designed to work with them to learn where the power structures are within the organization, carry their messages, and make everybody stronger in concert. This is not something that I can do on my own. This is not something that advancing diversity can do on its own. This is going to take a concerted effort among any number of different institutions in order to truly move the dial. This is egoless work as far as we're concerned.
You just made a good point right there that I want to expand on real quick, because see, this is where I think that to your point, we missed the boat. It's programs like yours and ours that we should begin to start partnering, delivering the same message out here, because MOBE is all about marketing opportunities in business and entertainment. So there's certain ways in which we should collaborate down the road to deliver the messages that you're talking down the road, and we grow that to other places. Just like I was saying the other day about on last Thursday was Vote Day, and BET was running this big thing on Vote Day. But why not run that across all the minority networks, Hispanic, African Americans, whatever? Why not have a big Vote Day across the board so that everybody gets the same message? It could be easily done. And if you create the village, the community will just keep growing and growing and growing. But let me ask this, Jack. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to do two things. One is that I know you sent your white papers over on the case for education and diversity, and in my listening audience, if anyone is interested in getting a copy of that, please come to MOBE Symposium at gmail.com. MOBE Symposium at gmail.com, and we have the white paper on the case for education and diversity as tools for business growth. But Jack, you have a big conference coming up tomorrow. Tell the audience a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, and we have 3 white papers available now on the business case for education and diversity at meetingprep.com. I'd also tomorrow, thanks for asking, we've been doing a series of leadership conversations. We had one focused on diversity not too long ago. Tomorrow we're focusing on ageism, the boomer generation, its economic value, but also the institutional bias against media buying toward the boomer generation. We have Keith Reinhardt, legendary creative executive, and 3 other leaders from the industry and from commerce, from experts in ageism, Ken Dykewall, Susan Feldman, and Peter Hubble. And it'll be a very engaging conversation. 1 p.m. You can register free for the Zoom at MediaVillage.com or watch live streamed at MediaVillage.com, 1 o'clock Eastern.
Hey, Jack, we've got a question here that came from Facebook. They wanted to know, you talked about that dual mentorship. They wanted you to expand a little bit more on that. What did you really mean by that? They'd like to hear a little bit more about it.
We started that process in 2011 with an organization called Women in Media Mentoring Initiative that evolved into womenadvancing.org, which still lives on today, really identifying the fact that you could mentor, but the generation of mentors really had a lot to learn about not just the culture, but the knowledge, the digital knowledge, the expertise of having grown up in a digital age, what I call the hooked up generation, now called Gen Z, first generation to grow up fully in the internet age, not just the digital age. And that as they emerged, they're now at the older end, they're 24, 25, 26, and the younger end, they're 16, 17, this little window of young people who are really incredibly diverse, have completely different attitudes, having grown up in a social media world where in many ways diversity is blind. For all the negative it does, it had positives as well. And really we could learn from how they engaged with each other, how they support each other, how they didn't see color in the same way that older generations. So from a mentoring point of view, the mentors had as much, if not more, to learn, and they came together with a mutual agreement to engage with each other, find each other's strengths, each other's weaknesses, each other's needs, each other's need for counsel, not just skills, on how the culture is changing and how to adapt to it.
Well, I'm going to close out on this one, unless I get another message that comes through, and I'm going to turn it over to Yvette. And I want to ask a question that came up that I thought was very unique the other day. At the U.S. Open, Naomi Osaka won the U.S. Open, and Tom Rinaldi came on to interview her. And she had been wearing 7 different Black Lives Matters masks in each of the different tennis matches she had. So Rinaldi says to her, "What was your message by wearing these 7 Black Lives Matter?" And she turned to him and said, "What did you get out of it?" And he never responded. What's you guys' thoughts on that? For my ending.
Yeah, I think we all need to be asking ourselves that question. I mean, these issues are not new. You know, I think that's the part of the frustration. I think the deja vu that, you know, a lot of Black people feel, other people of color might feel, that, you know, this is no different than when I was in high school. You know, I had Howard Beach, I had Yusef Hawkins, you know, I had Eleanor Bumpers. I grew up with all of these same social issues that we're faced with. So I think she's, you know, to use a tennis analogy, kind of hitting the ball back to him, right? To ask him, it's, you know, to a certain extent, we're tired of explaining this.
Exactly.
You know, it's time for other folks. If you care, if you're saying this matters, if you're putting out the statements, if you're writing, you know, the very basic checks to the NAACP and kind of checking your little boxes, it's time for you to do more than that. You know, our emotional labor, our physical labor, how much more labor can we do? You know, and I think she just won a match. She's made this very clear. She's probably saying what a lot of folks out there are saying, right? It's time for others to pick up the ball and do some heavy lifting here, right? We can't do this on our own, right? It takes a village. And that's why I joined this one, to make some changes happen.
Well, you know, first of all, Curtis, thank you. Yvette, thank you so much for inviting Phil and I to join you today and to have this important, it's not just a conversation, it's a message that needs to be communicated over and over and over again and needs to be heard. In terms of Tom Rinaldi, I thought he missed what could have been a historic moment in media that would have lived on if he had understood that the question that she asked was not rhetorical, it was not defensive, it was not a non-answer, it was the answer.
Exactly.
She was saying it's not about what message I'm sending, it's what message you understand.
Exactly.
And how you react. It's understanding your reaction to it and how it conforms to the to what my feelings are. And I thought her answer was, you know, the only answer that personified the right answer. And unfortunately, he was tone deaf.
No question.
And I don't think that he's paid the price for that tone deafness. I don't think that he should have been standing on that platform, delivering that award, that championship trophy. If he wasn't tuned in right now of all times.
Exactly. No, you're right, Jack. You're right. But let me say this: it's been a pleasure tonight to have both Jack, you and Phil on board. I enjoyed my conversation. You guys did an outstanding job. Before I turn over to Yvette, let me make one last thing. If you want a copy of the MediaVillage white paper on diversity for business growth, send an email to MOBE Symposium @gmail and put MediaVillage white paper in the subject line. Again, MOBE Symposium @gmail.com. I want to say thank you, Jack and Phil. I'm hoping that we continue to keep this conversation going. I'd love to see MOBE continue to work with you. I'd like to do this again down the road to see what I would call part 2 of this, but definitely would love to try to see how we can build a partnership with MediaVillage. And now I would turn it over to our illustrious leader, Yvette Moyo, to close us out. Yvette?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Curtis. This has been amazing. I really want to thank Phil and Jack for bringing the conversation that we have been forced to have after our pitches on Madison Avenue. These are conversations we've been forced to have. There's nowhere else to be heard, just like there was nowhere else for the tennis winner to be heard. She wasn't seen. She wasn't heard. She wasn't acknowledged. And we've got to change that. And that this is Curtis's vision for us to see your work and to partner with you, to collaborate so that we tear down these barriers and it's really a barrier that really says, I don't see anybody that doesn't look like me. I don't care about anybody that doesn't look like me. I don't hear it. You can say it 7 times. You can show me 7 different ways, and I still won't see you. I still won't hear you. And I can say that because I've been a salesperson, a media salesperson for, the first 11 years of my life. And now I've owned a magazine or presented a magazine for a nonprofit for 6 years. And it's the same thing. And what I refuse to do at this point is go in front of a white media buyer and present my life, my passion, my people, and put that before them to lay it out and have somebody say, I really don't understand what you're talking about. I don't understand when you're talking about the power of the Black dollar is stronger. And you're looking at categories, you're looking at over-index, and they still don't get it, that you're bringing something to the table that's valuable. And I'm an expert in the Black experience. And it is hurtful, it is ridiculous, and it is counterproductive for the companies that are represented by these agencies. It is not an interest in ROI. It is an interest in I. So this has been a case for education and diversity as tools for business growth. And thank you. Thank you for being willing to present what has been happening and what will happen, but will continue to happen if we don't say stop it right now. So thank you so much, Curtis. It was a great success. I can't wait to see it again. There were some gems. I'm not even going to go over the gems, except to say that I absolutely love the idea of having the diversity person be the investment person, or the person that has to deliver bottom line results as a result of them changing things to be more colorful. I'll just say it that way, in corporate America and within the halls of the businesses on Madison Avenue, where all the money lies.
Absolutely.
That's true. That's true.
So thank you.
I hear that message. I'm going to give some thought to that with Phil. That's a really good idea. Chief Diversity Investment Officer.
I think there will be history, Jack. I think if you phrased it in that way with Phil's background, I think it'd be definitely a history move. a
I
history.
think so too.
And
And that's your idea, Curtis. I'm not going to steal that one. I'll, we'll put your name under that one. That was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant. And I just want to stick around a little bit more, Jack and Phil, because we have some excellent things coming up in addition to your program tomorrow, and I plan to join you. It sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
But next Monday for MOBE Mondays, September 28th, we have music and the movement of Minneapolis. For people my age, that's a huge story, right? And for young people who understand, people like Prince is going to be off the chain. Entertainment journalist Wendy Wheaton will lead the discussion with Gary Hines, music director of Sound of Blackness, singer-producer Stokely, Kevin Fleming, program director of KPFK-LA and owner of the Urban Buzz, and Jackie Thompson, president of P&R Alumni Foundation, as they share their journey growing up or working in Minneapolis and their part in that signature sound, music artists taking a stand in social justice issues, the future of music, and more. That's MOBE Mondays. And occasionally, when there is a special opportunity, we have what we call MOBE Tuesday specials. And Tuesday, September 29th, the topic is the role of music in the development of American culture. We talk about the highly anticipated National Museum of African American Music's initiatives preserving and celebrating Black music and its contribution to American culture and soundtrack. Tuisha Rogers Simpson, amazing friend of MOBE, we call her Wish. Tuisha Rogers Simpson, Vice President of Brand and Partnership at the museum, will lead the discussion with Peter Caden, Vice President of Marketing at Empire, Lynn Scott, Vice President of Marketing at HITCO, and Brandon Pankey, Vice President of Business Development and Operations at Live Nation, about how Black artists are marketed in the industry and how the increase in digital content has transformed how music is released and consumed. These are very exciting topics. I'm so proud to be a part of MOBE. Marketing opportunities and entertainment.
Jack and Phil, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to further.
Thanks for having us.
All right, take care. Talk soon.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next Monday and Tuesday, and maybe even tomorrow night.
You got it.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.